Catherine, you want to hand out the index cards and the pens? If you would join my team, so we have
All right, we are recording.
Ready? Okay. Oh, good deal. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for taking the time. We will officially begin. For those who are at home, watching us on Zoom, thank you all for your patience, time, and consideration. I assure you, it will be worth the wait. You have a phenomenal plethora of almost phenomenal and five of those phenomenal women in the city. So please sit back, enjoy, and let's enjoy groundbreaking storytellers. I have a pleasure and honor and privilege of introducing our MC, that is Deborah Levine. Deborah Levine is a former diversity and inclusion trailblazer, an award-winning author of 18 books. Some of which are here. Please make sure you buy as much as you can. She'll want to take them home. She'll have a cat. She is an award-winning trailblazer of 18 books and the Tennessee chair of the G100 Women's Leaders Intercultural Dialogue Wing. She founded the American Diversity Report 17 years ago and served as an editor-in-chief as well as being an opinion columnist for the Chapter Times Free Press. Deborah has created several coalitions bringing diverse communities together, including the DuPage Chicago Interfaith Resource Center and the Chicago Women's Council on Diversity. Her documentary, Untold Stories of a World War II Liberator, is a winner of 15 international film festivals. She is a well-known speaker on both inclusion and storytelling and created this program, Women's Groundbreakers Storytelling. Let's welcome our MC, who will introduce our guest, Deborah Levine.
Thank you so much, Vincent. I really appreciate the opportunity to bring us together for Women's History Month and the Women's Groundbreakers storytelling. I will share with you that it was back in 1909 there was the first Women's International Day held by women labor organizers on behalf of sweatshop lady employees. And it would be another 50 years before the United Nations would make that day official. And then it would be another 5 years before the President of the United States claimed we had a Women's History Week. And another 7 years before Congress agreed upon Women's History Month. Not as if the women in this country weren't advocating, protesting, and hoping for more equity. Oh yes, in fact, I was in one of the first women's liberation marches down Fifth Avenue in 1970 when we flooded the streets. We're still working on it. So when I founded the Chattanooga Women's Council on Diversity, more than 20 years ago, we also formed this women's storytelling event for Women's History Month. It's been an amazing of women who have done great things for us with the skills that women often have in collaboration and coalition building, which we need today more than ever. So I'm pleased to bring together this wonderful panel, and I would like to introduce them so that you can meet them and hear their stories today. Each one of them will tell you their story, and while they are doing so, I want you to put down any questions you have on the index cards on your table for number one, and then We'll do it again, 2, 3, and the fourth panelist. And at that point, we'll take the Q&A. So you should have pens and index cards looking forward to hearing your questions, and online, please add your questions. Now, before I start, I would like to thank our meeting planner, who is Catherine Bays, who was an administrative assistant for the Tennessee Department of Health, but relocated here to Chattanooga after earning her degree in hospitality and tourism administration from UTC, and oversaw the Southeast Tennessee development statewide run-in-white care and HIV prevention. Certified as a government meeting planner by the Society of Government Meeting Professionals, she served as Chattanooga's chapter president, fundraiser, and education program leader for 15 years. Recently, she worked as an independent contractor, event strategist for Marist Global Events, and conference director for the National Harm Reduction Coalition. And we are so appreciative of her service for us today. Now we're going to go to our panel. We have these wonderful 4 ladies: Lulu Copeland, Gail Dawson, Vanessa Jackson, and Talitha McJunkin. First, we're going to start alphabetically with Lulu, right here, consultant at Regional Economic and Workforce Development, Director of Economic and Workforce Development Administration at Chattanooga State Community College, and Executive Director of Tennessee China Net. Lulu is the Tennessee State Lead for Million Women Mentors, an international movement promoting STEM careers for women. Lulu, let's hear it.
Hi. Okay, a lot. So I'm Lulu Copeland, and
Whoops.
yeah,
It was fine until she grabbed it and moved.
so different coaches telling our story. She said, start with something that's easy, something that's easy for other people to absorb, or stomach, I guess. And then think of something crazy, and then blend it between the two with my story. So here goes. So the traditional part of me is that I attended Pearson High School. I have a BS and an MS in engineering from UTC, and retired from Chattanooga State after 23 years of economic and workforce development. And so the less traditional way to present my life would be, I am Chinese. I grew up in Taiwan. I lived for many years in Philippines. And before immigrating to US, that was when we lived in Philippines. So I attended elementary school in Taipei, Taiwan, junior high school in Quezon City, Philippines, and graduated from, like I said, Hickson High School, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and ended up here in Chattanooga. I'm not from Chattanooga, but Chattanooga has been my home for the last 40+ years. My career journey is not very adventurous to start. I started architecture, and when the job market did not look good for architecture, I got married and moved back to Tennessee, and moved back to Chattanooga. I enrolled in UTC's mechanical engineering program. Oh, I forgot to mention, after I graduated from high school, my family moved to New York City. So after graduating with my BS in mechanical engineering, I worked for TVA, then Old Mills, until Mommy Track and sunsetting of Old Mills took me to Chattanooga State. And that taught a life lesson too. Companies don't last forever. So Channing State launched my more exciting career in economic and workforce development. I was on the team that recruited Volkswagen, Amazon, Barker Chemical, and Nokia Tires. We did a lot of training projects for TDA, DuPont, Lazy Boy, Whirlpool, Geschlaug, BASF, and many more. So through these training projects, I got to know more diverse community than I know in this area. Internationals and locals that want to elevate themselves with better jobs, acquire better job skills. We went into different communities, including high schools or neighborhoods, recruit talents for the same companies we recruited. That afforded me to get to know people, their dreams, what they might have imagined, but needed something to get there. So that was the inspiring and fulfilling to be able to help them with their journey. So although DuPont is no longer in our community, I got to know over 100 people that benefited from the training partnership. Chattanooga was credible when we were at the table speaking to Volkswagen and Barker Chemical due to the DuPont testimonies, or stories as they would call them. When DuPont ended its operation, we helped many with their next stops of their career journey. They are now with some new employers, such as Volkswagen, Barker Chemical, Corsa is a Turkish joint venture with DuPont. And many went to older ones like Lodge that makes the iron skillet. BASF has been here since 1970s, I think. So during that time, while talking to the students or these team members of different companies, I knew that articulation with four-year institutions is important because they want to grow in their jobs and they needed something to grow in that pathway. So we did we worked with UTC, Tennessee Tech, and others. My last attempt was starting a conversation with Brown College when we recruited Nokia Tires to Dayton. They had just started their engineering program in Dayton, and I knew that would be important to some of our graduates that's already working in that area. And that was in 2019. Except my attempt led to my early retirement. I hope someone will continue at that project. But in my new pretend retirement status, I'm serving as advisor on college engineering programs. And that relationship included helping them set up a student chapter of Society of Women Engineering. I'm also serving as the executive director of Tennessee China Network, as Deborah mentioned. So I'm offering my service and knowledge to Chinese companies and professionals that are already in Tennessee. And sometimes that gets me some attention, including a visit from FBI. I recently took on a few contract projects that all related to engineering, advanced manufacturing, resource connection, and underneath it all, I'm always looking for ways to advance women in their career journey. And that's really the focus of the Men and Women Mentors work. I enjoy being a connector and a collaborator, building impactful relationships. Deborah was a facilitator for a panel discussion when a few of us founded the Chattanooga Professional Society of Women Engineers. And so we're still friends. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Now, will someone collect the index cards and give out more for number 2? And by the way, the whole issue of women in STEM is an amazing one. Has been for years, and I'm delighted to I actually tell you a story. When I was 16, back in the 1960s, and computer science was first offered, computer programming. My mother said to me, when you're in high school, you should take a course. And I said, oh no, I'm going to be a poet, a philosopher. And she said, this is not a suggestion. I ended up being an IT director in the 1980s. So now we're going to go on to our second wonderful, wonderful panelist, Dr. Gail Dawson. She is Associate Professor of Management and Director of Diversity and Inclusion at the Rollins College of Business at UTC. She holds a PhD in Business Administration at the University of South Florida and teaches graduate and undergraduate classes, including human resource management, diversity, and organizational behavior. Gail, let's hear it.
Hi, I'm Gail Dawson. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I got my Bachelor's of Science degree from Florida A&M University, which is a historically Black college. From there, I worked for General Motors in Flint, Michigan, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Tarrytown, New York. And when I decided to go back and get my MBA at Drexel University, my thought was that I would go back into a manufacturing environment and help with all the problems that I had seen in my time at General Motors. Fortunately, sometimes things don't work out the way that you plan them to. And for me, it worked out so much better because I ended up being a management consultant for Price Waterhouse out of the Office of Government Services. So I was based out of Washington, D.C., did quite a bit of time in San Diego. And while I was working as a management consultant, I happened to go to a National Black MBA Association meeting out in San Francisco. And I ran into one of my former professors who was promoting the PhD project. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. What's the PhD project? It was just starting at that. Now, the PhD project was an organization that was started by KPMG and a couple other organizations. They found that they were having difficulty finding qualified applicants from underrepresented groups in business. And they identified those underrepresented groups as African American, Hispanic American, and Native American. And their solution for that was that they wanted to target people from those groups, African American, Hispanic American, and Native Americans, who could go back and get a PhD and work as role models and mentors. Their idea basically was if they could change who was in front of the classroom, they would change the outcome for people who stay in those classrooms and create a more diverse, more qualified workforce. So I thought that sounds like a great idea, sign me up. So I went back to the University of South Florida to get my PhD in interdisciplinary business. And I've been here at UTC for the past 24 years, teaching human resources, organizational behavior, and diversity. What I found, though, is that a lot of my students don't come from very diverse backgrounds and haven't been exposed to a lot of diversity. So sometimes they base what they think about those others on what they see in media or in news or what they have heard from other people. So my goal really is to get them to think more deeply about diversity and to understand what it's like to be the other. I encourage them to go out into the community to get firsthand knowledge and get to know people. So one of the projects that I have for them is it's called The Experiences Other. So in their project Experiences Other, they have to go out by themselves, which I think is the hardest thing for any college student to do. So if they go alone, they have to go somewhere they've never been before. They have to surround themselves by people who are different on some diversity characteristic. They get to choose what that diversity characteristic is. They have to spend at least 2 hours in that situation, and then they have to write it up. What I encourage them to do, though, is to think about why they chose the experience they chose, what their expectations were before they entered the experience, to talk about what happens once they do, and to kind of reflect on, was it what you thought it was going to be, and what you can really learn from that experience. One of the things that I really want, since most of my students are business majors, they're going to be going out into the world, working in diverse environments, and they'll probably be making decisions and policies and those kind of things about people who are different than them. So I want them to understand why something that they do or say might affect people differently based on their diversity characteristics. This semester, I had a really interesting student with an experience. He happens to be a young white male student who went to a Hispanic church. And I talked to him about what his expectations were before he went. And he said, well, I expected to feel really, really uncomfortable. I expected to have people not want me there. I thought it was going to be a horrible experience. I thought I'd be isolated, and he had a lot of negative expectations. And he went to, and I'm not even sure which Hispanic church it was in this community, but he went there. It was a small Hispanic church. And the first people that he encountered was a family. The parents didn't speak much English, but the children did. And the parents went over to him, they introduced themselves, and started talking to him about who he was, why he was there, what was going on, and invited him to sit with them and made him feel really welcome. The children translated the entire service for him. They went out of their way to make him feel welcome. So when I talked to him about it, I shared a couple of things with him. First, I shared with him that, and it may not be the case for every religious institution, but in most religious institutions, they're going to make you feel welcome. They like to have people who want to come and to find out about their religion and that kind of thing, and they do try to make people feel welcome. So I would expect people to try to make you feel welcome. But I also asked him, I said, well, why do you think the family told you to sit with them and really welcome you in? And he kind of thought about it. I said, well, they have been in that situation where they have been the other. And when you have been in that situation where you're the other, and sometimes it is a very lonely, isolating kind of feeling, where you feel like you're being excluded from everything, they didn't want him to have to go through that. So they welcomed him in and tried to make him feel as comfortable as possible. One of the things that I hope comes out of the things that I teach and the experiences that I encourage my students to do, I want them to be able to make the best informed decisions about a diverse community when they're in a position to hire, when they're in a position to make policies, when they're in a position to affect the environment around them. So those are the things that I hope to create with students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail. Can we collect the index cards from number 2 and give out some for 3? By the way, Gail is one of the advisors of the American Diversity Report. I'm very grateful for all that she does. And she taught me how to make a PowerPoint demonstration also.
And she just got off from there and created all sorts of stuff.
Which just goes to show you, you gotta start somewhere, but boy, some folks really get you going. So with that, we're going to go to number 3. And that is Vanessa Jackson. She is program specialist for the City of Chattanooga's Office of Multicultural Affairs and was one of Chattanooga's first neighborhood relations specialists, amplifying the voices and mitigating the barriers of diverse communities. She holds a bachelor's degree in political science and cultural studies from the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, and an MA in public administration from UTC. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you for saying it's an honor to sit on this panel with such esteemed women doing such great things in our community and in our world. I'm Vanessa Jackson, and my story starts with a little girl in South Side Chattanooga, the oldest 3 girls. I grew up in a loving environment, but in a community with most of the people who look just like me. attended Howard High School during a time when it was predominantly black, because it has been historically black high school in our city up until recent years. I had a desire really initially to go to HBCU for my undergraduate training. I think my dad was sort of an encourager of that. But then I wanted to think myself, but I had an opportunity to go to the 1982 World's Fair in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I just see the team's campus up there. And I was like, oh, well, when it's time for me to come up college, I think I may want to consider UT. And so I made that decision to go to UT when that time came, and it was a great opportunity. As I mentioned before, I grew up in an environment where most people look like me. I did have experiences through student council and other extracurricular activities, where I got a chance to interact with youth and individuals from throughout the city who were different than me, either ethnically or socioeconomically or culturally. But for the most part, my whole base was consistent of people who looked like me and thought like me and moved like me. So when I got a chance to go to UT Knoxville, it opened up a new world for me. I had an opportunity to meet individuals from not only throughout the state, but throughout the whole world, because they have a big international community on their campus. And I think that it enriched me as a human being, and also gave me an opportunity to really realize how special I was, but at the same time, how special that other people were as well, with just the talents and the ethnicities and cultures they bring to this globe. And so met a lot of people there from all over the world, all across the state. And so I think that's important too, because it's one of our other panelists mentioned earlier. Oftentimes we can be within 50 miles of each other, but be so diverse and just so different in our thoughts, in our ideas, in our experiences. And so that experience in college as an undergraduate gave me that perspective that I think has been now the foundation of my professional career. Once I graduated from undergraduate school, I came home as Dr. Bean mentioned. Thought I wanted to go to law school for a little bit, still teeter-totter on that now. So I said to you, we're talking to a millennial crowd, follow your dreams, but be open to courses in life that may somewhat pivot and take you down pathways that can be exciting and dynamic at the same time. And so but then I came home and I thought, well, I might just work a while and consider getting a master's. So I started working on my master's at UTC. I was in the MBA program there. While I was there, I got my first job as a professional. It was in the state of Tennessee. And in that job, I was called an eligibility counselor. I got a chance to meet all kinds of diverse people. Women and men, people from all throughout this county, coming through the doors of that institution, seeking out services, resources to help them support their families. So it was a humbling experience for me. It was a leveling experience for me. It was an eye-opening experience. I left that job and did a stint as a probation officer. I got a chance to not only work with people who had made mistakes in our society, but also with the criminal justice system and judges, other probation officers, those, I guess, being in a position to help provide those individuals with what they need to really sit down, of course, for a new life, if they were agreeing to take it. And then realizing some of the barriers that exist for individuals that may want to embark upon a new life. That was very eye-opening to me as well. So now I'm not realizing it, but I'm sort of packing in my toolbox for how to deal with different people, diverse backgrounds. And as I said, I deal with people who are on probation here in Chattanooga, as far as like rural communities and like Marion County and Athens and beyond. So, I've been doing that, and I went on, I got to see my master's and went on and became a local planner over the state of Tennessee, and I had 5 community contracts in different satellite communities with throughout this 50-mile radius of Chattanooga. When I went into those situations, providing my technical assistance support, advising planning commissions and so forth, I was oftentimes the only Black person in the room, the only female in the room. And I was telling my mother, we were laughing about this the other night, how oftentimes it's sad, but it's true. They took the endorsement of another male in the room for everybody else to agree that I knew what I was talking about. So I experienced all of that and learned how to navigate through it. And then after that, I heard about opportunity in city government. I feel like I was doing some good things in other areas within our 50-mile radius, but I wanted to make an impact in my own community. I saw things in Chattanooga that I felt like need to be changed, and things in which I had a skill set that I wanted to seek, and I guess hone my chops to make a difference. Found out about an opportunity in city government as a neighborhood relations coordinator. I was one of the, and I got that position. I was one of the city's first 3 neighborhood relations coordinators. Got an opportunity to learn a lot about what the diverse needs of our communities are. And, you know, the differences in textures and fabrics just from household to household, from now to now in this community. That job was a natural pivot to my current position in within community engagement, formerly the Office of Multicultural Affairs, where we work to enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout city government. We have a number of successful programs, one of which I'm most proud of is our internship program that I coordinate. It gives diverse individuals, college students, an opportunity to see government in action and to see what it would like to work. We also do great things as far as our minority business programs, that we help to mitigate those barriers that exist for the people who want to start businesses. Because small business is the backbone of our society here, and it's a route to upward mobility. And everybody should have that route of being able to be equipped with what they need to be able to make a pathway to success in that area. So I am just delighted to work in the area and to help individuals. One thing that I want to conclude with is, and what I've learned the most is that government really does have a responsibility to remove barriers of discrimination and I guess lack of inclusion of diverse communities. It really does. And whereas we say that those barriers may exist in the mind of individuals and so forth, and they do, but government has a role in just tearing down and mitigating those institutional practices, the policies, the practices, the standards by which it is ran. They have worked in a way to help advance some levels of the population, some individuals of the population, and to hamper and hinder others. And so I've learned that, and that is my charge, and I guess the impetus of my work, and to realizing that it's government's role to create and the private sector's role to innovate. And when government creates boundaries so everybody will thrive and succeed, I think that the rest of our institutions and policies and public and private sector will come on board as well. So that's a little bit about Vanessa. I hope you enjoy my story.
So I'm going to collect the index cards for number 3 and the event 4. Thank you so much, Vanessa. And I would say a few years ago when it was still the Office of Multicultural Affairs, I had the honor of doing diversity training professional. So I did, and it not only was incredibly educational for them, but also for me and fun. A great Chattanooga will definitely have a great asset. What you do. Pleasure. Now let's go on to our fourth and final amazing woman. Her name is Talitha McJones. She is a leader and coordinator of international multicultural and multilingual teams as they navigate change and develop strategies in the areas of human and environmental rights. She has roots in social work where she learned how to listen deeply and communicate with diverse people. I know that she has many years' experience dealing with diversity that is international, to hear what she has to say.
So my name is I was born and raised here in Chattanooga, and our roots go back 200 plus years. So we're super rooted in the South. And I've lived most of my life here, with the exception of 3 years in Chiang Mai, Thailand. I got my undergrad degree in social work at UTC, and I got my master's degree in public administration from UTC. There's any MPA students here, but the best are. Yes. And so I've spent almost 20 years working in the nonprofit and social service sector here in Chattanooga, starting as a social worker in group homes and runaway shelters. I'm currently the senior strategy advisor for Earth Rights International, which is a global nonprofit with offices in Peru and the US and Thailand. We focus on Indigenous peoples' rights and corporate accountability in relation to climate justice and human rights abuses. And in my roles over the past 9 years, I've worked with people from at least 25 different countries, and currently work with a very diverse group of people from Mexico, Peru, Brazil, Colombia, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, and the Philippines. So there's a lot of diversity, and it's not by any means just race. It cuts across language and culture and how people grew up and educational levels. There's just so many layers of diversity to all these people, all these countries. So through all my work, I've witnessed over and again the power of diversity and actual inclusion. People talk a big inclusion game, but often don't actually do it. And I agree with Audre Lorde that it is not our differences that divide us, but our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. The world, our organizations, and even our families are just becoming more and more diverse every single year. And yet we're separating ourselves off into smaller and smaller factions based on sameness. I'm driven to make connections across those differences in service of solving the massive collective social and environmental problems that we face as humans. Because we're all in this together and there's a lot to sort out. My path to embracing diversity started in elementary school at Hickson Elementary right here in Chattanooga, and consisted of me noticing and being curious about the one Black girl in my class, or the one Black family in my church. And then in high school, I started rebelling against and calling out the racism I saw all around me, although I did not recognize what still lived in me from the mere fact of growing up white in the South, where we cannot avoid catching and being taught all kinds of discrimination. And you have to tease it apart as you study. I was truly introduced to diversity when I got a degree in social work and worked in juvenile court and the group homes and runaway shelters. Most of the colleagues that I worked with and the youth that we worked with were Black, and over those years, I convinced myself I was an expert at diversity. I understood it all. Look at the people I work with, as if proximity alone somehow conveyed this deep understanding and knowledge. What I came to understand years later was how I unconsciously over-identified with Black people, and especially Black women, in an attempt to win their approval and prove that this white girl is not like all this others. So it's kind of the other side of the same coin of place of racism, right? Because it's still seeing someone as the other and responding to that. So fast forward to the past 10 years or so, I've been on a very deep journey of discovery around racial diversity, just in a personal way. My job is actually in operations and sort of back of the house things in organizations. So I focus more on operationalizing diversity and inclusion in processes and systems and things like that. But on a personal level, I dive into the history of race, particularly in the South and how it shows up here. I've been doing a lot of deep dives into the history of race in America from Black perspectives in particular. I've learned how white people have reckoned with race, what it means to show up differently in diverse spaces, and to challenge myself, and how to practice meaningful inclusion. I continue to learn, always be learning, and have taken what I have already learned into the work that I currently do. And so what I've found is that what is produced through my work, whether it's a new system or a new database or a process or training that I'm doing, is unequivocally always better when diverse perspectives are incorporated into the design without fail. And it always is something different. The end product is always something different than where it begins when you start pulling in the diverse perspectives in your organization or group talking about. So, for example, I recently led a systems transition for a nonprofit that was staffed with a lot of older adults who were not very tech savvy. They had a lot of fear around shifting to a new system, and were concerned about the learning curve. They said your PowerPoint comment. But because we were dedicated to an inclusive process that honored and accounted for their age and skills, and we didn't shame them, super important. But rather we sought their input and then we designed around their needs. And so this meant we ended up with a much better, more sustainable system that could actually withstand changes in staff over time, even because it incorporated really helpful information that they suggested, like information bubbles next to fields so that people knew what went in those fields. Helpful instruction embedded throughout the software, an intuitive user design, and plenty of resources and instructions to help them get on board. So only some of that would have happened if it hadn't been for their input. I'd say 75% of what we did was based on including them. And then currently I'm leading the strategic planning process for Earthrise, the international NGO that has 70+ staff in 7 countries, and they speak 4 different languages. So can you imagine if we were trying to push through some top-down 5-year strategic planning process without their input? There would be rebellion. It would be absolutely chaotic. I cannot imagine. But because of their input, because we value it and are seeking it out and spending the time and money to seek it out, we're ensuring that the process and resources take into consideration their regional differences, that it accounts for different levels of understanding, it incorporates language equity. And so by engaging staff in the process design phase, like figuring out what's going to happen, be involved in that phase, planning, we ended up with a process and resources that look very different than when we started. And it's all way, way better. Everything is translated into all the languages so staff can read strategy documents in their own language. Can you imagine having to read some dense professional strategy document in Spanish if just had conversational Spanish? And they've been having to do that for a while now. So we're really devoted to language equity in particular. What that means is have to budget for translation and interpretation. And it has to be very organized. So it takes time and effort to do inclusion right. And it's part of the problem why it doesn't get done a lot of times. And just one other point, that all the guidance documents were written in a way that's easy and quick to digest, given everyone's capacity. It's a very, very busy organization. So being intentional and thoughtful about inclusion takes time, it's messy, and has to be included in the budget, which means it has to be a priority for the organization or it will not be. And if you ever try to do some sort of inclusion project, just even getting things translated and then you don't have the budget for it, and you're having to track down volunteers and try, just the organization being behind inclusion, like really being committed to it is absolutely. Yeah, and organizations are made up of people, and people is where everything begins, where decisions are made, and where plans are made, and all of that. So talking about diversity and inclusion is one thing. What I challenge, especially white people and people, to do is look inside first. Do you really believe in diversity and inclusion? Or is it just something you're supposed to do, or you're doing it because somebody told you to? And then what are those just below the surface thoughts that don't ever say out loud, that arise when you think about diversity? Have you done your own work to identify and unlearn your own biases? Because if you haven't, it's gonna come out in some way, shape, when you're working people. Everything begins inside, and that is often the reason that efforts to embrace diversity and practice inclusion fail, because people do not truly believe in it or understand its power, because when they do, they prioritize it. So Mahatma Gandhi said, our ability to reach unity and diversity will be the community and the test of our civilization, and that's exactly what's happening right now. I think I said that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure there are a lot of organizations that should be paying attention to your advice right now. And I hope if you wouldn't mind collecting the index cards for number 4. I'm looking forward to seeing what people are going to be asking all 4 of you. One of the things that intrigues me the most is that you all talk about your childhood and how that has influenced what you've become today. It does. Many of you know that I grew up in colonial British Bermuda. Thank you. Which in those days was extremely segregated. And I was the only Jewish little girl on the island. And I thought that was normal. Can you imagine what it was like when we moved to New York City? Yeah. The experience of different cultures creates a different mindset. For young people, there's a name for it called polyglot. That's what it was. And I experienced a great deal of discrimination because I spoke very proper British, which did not go well on the recess playground. Oh, language, even if it's a difference between American and British English, it can make a whole lot of difference in your life. And I hope that you will study them, learn them. Yes? Yeah. It's an amazing way to build your neural net. And that's what we hope to do, right? Make us all geniuses. It might take a little bit of time, but we'll do it. So while you're making yourself into a genius, let's take a look at some of the questions you have. Okay? So for number 1, good. And someone wanted to know, what was your most memorable mentorship?
There's been several, but as Deborah know, I'm very, very supportive and active in the Chattanooga engineering community. And there was a faculty member at UTC that took some students to the Chattanooga Engineers Club's meeting. So Chattanooga Engineers Club was founded in 1924, so it's actually celebrating 100 years this month. So I became the president in 2001, and I was the second female president of the Chattanooga Engineers Club. And then when I worked for Owen Mills, my manager, also, so I lapsed in membership after started working, and my manager at Owen Mills, since he was the president that year, he took some young engineers to the meeting, and basically there were some presidential duties that he distributed amongst the young engineers. But those are mentoring activities, really, sharing how to network, how to socialize with the engineering community. So those are, the UTC faculty and my manager that really paved the pathway for me being active in the engineering community.
Excellent. And one last question. What made you become an engineer?
Like I said, I actually was in architecture simply because I like math and I like art, and I thought that was the combination. And so when I decided to take on a second degree, I thought engineering would be the closer of the other degrees. So that's really why. And so talking about mindset of different culture, there are cultures that think engineering is a blue collar job. And that is true in some of the Chinese thinking. So my family thought architecture is white collar and engineering is blue collar. So, cultural tidbits.
I love it. Okay. Goodness. All right, let's go to Gail for a moment. Question for you. Have you seen one of your former students move on to a political or professional role and apply some of what they learned through the other branches?
Yes, absolutely. I've had students who come back, who work in Chattanooga and businesses here, and I've seen them at some of the events, and they come back to me and said, hey, I had you for human resources, and I hated when you had us do the experiences other project, but I use that stuff every day. So it's great for me to be able to see some of them thriving in the business community here. I also have a student who is over at Chat State who I think she's teaching HR. So
Okay, last question. Can you tell us of a story of something really challenging you faced in your work and what progress you've made in dealing with that challenge?
well, something challenging that I faced in a lot of different things. I guess there's been a lot of things that have been challenging, and just making sure that I can relate to some of the students, looking at the generational differences and that kind of thing. Being able to still connect with the students. I was talking to some people earlier, and I said, one of the things I had my students do, they looked at some CNN videos about certain African Americans when they realized that they were their race. Okay, they first realized that they were Black. And I asked one of my students, when did you first realize your race? And what was the situation? And one of my students this semester said, well, I realized my race when I was watching the debates when Obama was running for president. And he was wondering why Obama was the only Black person on the stage. And then he says, he was 6. And to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, that made me feel so old. Because I was teaching at UTC at that point, and had been for quite some time. But being able to see things through the eyes of my students and to adapt to some of those things. And one of the other things that I do, I choreograph line dances. So I also teach at the Arc, I teach line dance down there. And I have some of my students who suggest line dances. And some of them, they suggest line dances that they want to do. I also have to take that into consideration. And there's one of them that's a really good line dance, but it is a very much young person line dance. So I went and I learned it, and I told them, look, I will teach you this line dance. I will make sure that you know the steps. I will get you up to speed. But when I put the music on, I may not dance this whole dance with you. And they looked at me like, why? And I said, because I'm more than 3 times your age. But I have to say that I've learned the dance. Half of them have it pretty well right now. And when we did that last night, I danced almost that whole dance with them. And I kept up. And most of them kept up. Actually, some of them dropped out and came back in. But being able to see things through their eyes, to see things that are important to them, and be able to adjust my teaching and other things to take them into account.
Thank you. I don't, if we do this again, I'm gonna have you teach us how to dance.
Anytime.
All right, really. Oh, I love it. All right, Vanessa, we've got a couple of questions for you. Here's one. What program or campaign that you have been, do you think has been most successful in removing the most barriers for Chattanooga? Not an easy question.
Not this question because we gave so much work, and it is an ongoing process. It's like we chip away and trying to overcome barriers through our programs. But I talked to you a little bit about internship, and because we all are college age, I think I will delve into that one. Because, and I feel as though it's very successful because we can look around the city government right now and see the handiwork, the fruit of our labor. We've had several individuals that were interns to our program that now work with us. We had one young man that was an intern, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and he became a member of Red County's Academy. Yeah. We have one young lady that was an intern with us, and she finished undergrad, she's an intern, she decided to go to law school, she interned in the city attorney's office, she came back, and now she used to be an attorney. We can look all over, we're beginning now to look all over city government and see instances where students may have had internships with us, and now they've been placed for successful employment with the city, and they're now thriving. So that's a testament to the need and the success of the program, and I also would probably call that one to be most successful because the name of the program is Equity and Community Engagement Internship, and that is the lens in which we approach the program. It is not just based on racial things. We look at gender. We look at equity in terms of balance between students who come from urban settings and students that come from rural settings. We look at gender identity within it. And we've had all that spectrum to come through that program, which is now in existence about, I think we're now at our 12th year. So we're real quite proud of the work that we've done through the program. It is growing. We're also proud of our work in supply diversity. It is certainly still a work in progress because we're striving to be able to provide opportunities for diverse entrepreneurs to be able to do business with the city, to get city contracts, and to also get contracts with other large entities like TVA, EPB, and so forth. And so in doing that, we do also have some success stories of individuals who've been able to secure, million-dollar contracts with other entities, in our city, employers within our city. We've done a lot. We've done a lot to really bring groups together. I think something else that I'm very proud of is our intentionality of approach. Because I think with having a department as ours, we're very intentional about our work because this work has to be approached in an intentional way. So you just can't just say, oh, everybody play nice, kumbaya. No, it's not that kind of work. So we're very strategic in how we set the table. And in terms of setting tables, we mean that, we have individuals from our community that truly reflect the populations of people that we want to serve. And we hear from them. And what we hear all the time is not necessarily flattery to what we're doing currently, but we're open to what we hear. And we're working to be able to make a change needed. So I know that was like a roundabout question. I didn't hone in on one thing, but I think there's some things that are quite proud.
Oh, thank you, goodness. Coming back to that, hold on. But in the meantime, Talitha, I have a question for you, which amuses me. I don't know if it'll amuse you, but it says, what advice would you tell your past self who thought she knew it all at the time, with the knowledge you have now, after doing all the history and research? What would you tell them?
Slow down, to look inside, to really pay attention to the unspoken thoughts, to the intuition and hunches that I would get when I was doing something to earn the favor, for example, of my Black female supervisor. Because there are clues all around, especially for white people. I'm white, so I'm speaking to white people primarily, but there are clues to start seeing and understanding. And when you start doing that, it's really important not to blame or shame yourself, but just take a hard look at it. Just look, see what's there, decide what you want to change. Not your thoughts. It's something you was taught, and if you want to change it, you can. But the very first step is to really pay attention. I had too much hubris to look inside and think that I was anything other than a social warrior. So just slow down, pay attention to what's happening inside, and then take action whatever.
Thank you, because this next question is, can you explain more about the process of helping people address those feelings and expectations under the surface?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it's probably different for a lot of people, so I can only speak to my experience. And the only way that I started paying attention to that was when I started getting negative feedback from people, or started working with people through boundaries, and didn't accept my kindness and niceties and willingness to help and all of these things. It really took that mirror for me to start thinking, what's going on here? Because it's not anything when you grow up in a mostly white environment, white family, and white schools, and white churches, and all, you're not even aware of those things. And I'm talking so openly and freely about it, sitting next to two Black women, because they already know. These things that we deal with as white people that we're trying to, or that I'm trying to recognize and change and account for, are really important fundamental things that will affect every other decision you make in relation to working with difference. Because if you don't look at it, don't deal with it and learn and go seek out information. There are so many books on every single topic known to man, written, especially written by Black authors. That might be the place to read some stuff about Black authors and start seeing things from a different perspective. Take her class and do her exercise. Because we have to have something that breaks that trance, that cuts through those really dense layers of consciousness that we were taught men are shameful. Nobody wants to admit any of that. And the only reason I can so freely talk about it is because I've done the work and I know that that's not me, that that's where I came from, and that I saw it, and that I did something to change it. So.
Thank you very much. I would like to add to that, one of the beauties to being older is you've had time to do some of this work. And yet, older people are often viewed as irrelevant, right? Yeah. The very first article that I published, almost, 40 years ago, was about older women being ignored, and yet they are the glue of society. And I didn't really appreciate, although sometimes I'd like to wake up and be just 21 again, I really appreciate the years that I've been able to do this kind of and share with you. I have not been able to use all the time for questions that we have, but with you really writing them down, I will share them with our panelists, along hopefully with questions that come from our virtual attendees. And maybe we'll continue this conversation given those questions, okay? Yeah, because they're great, and your curiosity is wonderful. So having said that, stay tuned. We have your emails. If we do more articles about this, and they'll appear in the American Diversity Report, we will put you on the mailing list for our monthly newsletter so that you can receive it and see what's going to happen next. Also, if you have any interest in my books that are on the table back there, you can go to americandiversityreport.com and you can see all the books and order some. You can also see my documentary, World War II documentary, with the letters from my dad, who was a U.S. military intelligence officer assigned to interrogate Nazi prisoners of war, and my inspiration for doing all of this. Thank you. Take care. It's been a pleasure. Vincent, would you like to say anything in conclusion? Oh, I do have one thing. If you wouldn't mind giving me, I have a little gift for each of our panelists. Thank you so much for doing this with us. This is one of my books, When Hate Marches Down Main Street, Engaging a Community Response. This is something that we all want to do. And for you, Catherine, the one on the desk is yours. Thank you so much for helping arrange this, order it, and make it happen. Thank you all for coming. You're wonderful, and we expect to hear from you about becoming geniuses.
For my students who are here, thank you all for coming. You all received your extra credit for your